How does God speak? I've been reading in the book of Jeremiah these past days, and I find it so fascinating the way that God speaks to Jeremiah. And I think there might be some lessons here for us about hearing God's voice. So, what stands out to me as I read the book of Jeremiah is that God speaks to Jeremiah in such a visual way. Multiple times, God asks Jeremiah to look around, see a mundane thing that's right in front of him, and then God uses that thing to speak a message. Or God asks Jeremiah to go somewhere, and then God shows him something and uses it as an analogy. Time and time again, Jeremiah is asked by God to do stuff, physical stuff, or to see things, physical things. And God uses those stuff that he does and the things that he sees to deliver a message. And the funny thing to me is that while this book is actually about the message that God has for the people of Israel, you learn a lot about the character of Jeremiah. He is a young guy when God calls him, still a bit insecure, but God encourages him. He's quite emotional too, in the way that he responds to God, and the things that he goes through. I do understand that. Sometimes he's referred to as the weeping prophet, and yet it becomes clear through the things that he goes through. He has an extremely bold and strong character. And I can't help to suspect, by all the things that Jeremiah has to look at or has to do, that he is a bit of a creative person as well. Let's look at a few examples to clarify what I'm talking about. Right at the start, when Jeremiah is called in chapter 1, we read in verse 11, "And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Jeremiah, what do you see? And I said, I see an almond branch. And then the Lord said to me, you have seen well, for I am watching over my word to perform it." And this is so cool what happens here, because God seems to almost be playing with Jeremiah a bit. Jeremiah simply sees an almond tree and responds that to God, and the word for almond that he uses in Hebrew is shaket. And then God responds with, yes, I have been watching, which is the word shoket. So God lets Jeremiah tell God what Jeremiah sees, and then use the little wordplay to point something out. A guava tree. Also very nice. There's more to this analogy. The almond tree actually used to be the first tree that would bud in the spring. And so there was a saying that the almond watches for spring. And so God is saying here that as the almond watches for the spring to arrive, God is watching for the first opportunity to make the words that he spoke to Jeremiah come to pass. Isn't it such a clever way of using words and images to make a message clear? And this happens again and again. After this, God again asks Jeremiah, what do you see? And he sees a boiling pot. And God has a message with that as well. Later in the book, God gives Jeremiah a vision and asks the same question. What do you see, Jeremiah? Another time, Jeremiah is asked to go to a potter's place. He doesn't know what to do there, but he just goes and he sees the potter messes up with the clay and he uses the clay for a new pot. God again uses this simple mundane thing with the message, Israel's like a filled pot in the hands of a potter. Later Jeremiah is asked to buy a flask at the potter's place and smash it down, and God again has a message with it. I've written down every instance where God speaks to Jeremiah in this special way, and I filled a whole paper in front of me here. As you read the book of Jeremiah, you'll find that it's not so well structured as other books written by prophets. It seems Jeremiah maybe wasn't that much of a writer, was skilled at making literary structures as for example Zephaniah did, or Habakkuk. Actually the book is a collection of prophecies and stories written down by Baruch, a scribe of Jeremiah. Now, what I'm learning from all this is that God really sees the person that Jeremiah is, and he uses Jeremiah in a specific way that fits his character. But also, often Jeremiah is first asked to do something or just be present in the moment and look around, and only after he sees a certain thing that struck out to him, God speaks to him with giving him a message, using the thing that he saw. I find in my life with God, it's often the same. Often God asks me to look around or to give room to a thought or a song or something that pops up in my head. And God uses those things in my imagination, in the things I see, even in the things I do, to speak to me. God is actually asking me to be attentive. For example, this past week I was walking outside together with God and I looked at the sky and was completely overwhelmed. God said, take in this sky, the beauty of it. And God showed me that all this beauty that you see, all these colors, this vast expanse, it's only a glimpse of the beauty of who I am. I created all those things, and it's to show you a little something of who I am. God invited me to look, to take in, and then revealed something of his character to me. My question to you today would be, how do you think God wants to speak to you? Are you someone who thinks in images, or more a music person, or someone who's really touched by nature, books, drawing, or even doing maths, something I really can't imagine? Are you attentive in the ordinary things to hear the voice of God? And what do you think about the question that God asks Jeremiah? What do you see? Do you sometimes take time to just sit and look around and hear God's voice? Maybe this week give God some space to just speak to you through the things that you see, that you experience. Take time and really take it in, and know that God can and wants to use anything to speak to us, especially in a way that fits your character. He knows us personally, and living with God is a relationship. So that also means that as He speaks to us in a way that we understand. The question to us is, are our ears open? Or are our eyes open, our senses open to His voices? Right guys, thanks for watching. I hope this video encouraged you to grow in hearing God's voice. I hope to see you in the next video, and for now, may grace and peace be with you.